Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the next episode in the U.S. presidential election prediction series. It's complete chaos in the model. It is wildly changing. You'll see that when I go to show you the trend lines. Utter chaos. At this point, do any of the model results matter? I don't know. That said, I'm phrasing that wrong. I think the results do matter. I do think they are reasonably correct within their confidence intervals. I just don't know how much predictive power they have because the model is going everywhere. I don't know if that is the underlying data being bad or if my model is too sensitive. These questions I cannot answer until I have an election to tune against. So, the 2024 election will be better in that regard, hopefully. But for now, the model is at least extremely sensitive and flips around a lot. So we will see. That said, let's start where the model has everything at. Starting with Democratic. Safe seats. So we got California, Hawaii, District of Columbia, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Maryland. Not much surprise here. This is like the core set of extremely safe Democrat states. Moving to safe Republican, we got Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska at large, first, third, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Same deal here. This is pretty much always, and the model's been very consistent. This is what is safe for Republicans this election year. Again, no surprises. Other than maybe Montana, but really no surprises. Democrat likely. Oregon and Washington. Oregon's getting a bit safer for Biden. Illinois, I think this is correcting what I said last week is likely a polling issue because there's a bunch of polls saying Illinois was really close. I don't think it will be very close. If Illinois is very close, Trump is going to win in a landslide, and I don't think it's going to be very close. I think it will be Trump's win is going to be comfortable. Comfortable to me is like 300 to like 330 range. That's comfortable. It's like when you get past 331, I would say that's like landslide territory. But I'm really thinking he's going to be at most comfortable if he wins. Continuing this, we got Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Maine second. So that brings us to Republican likely, Montana, Texas, Missouri, Indiana, South Carolina. Again, really no surprises here. Here's where we start getting into the states that are possible to flip. I think everything I have listed so far, pretty much constant for every model I have, is not within any reasonable doubt possible of getting flipped by either party this election. I forgot Alaska. I always forget Alaska. None of these states are in reasonable risk of being flipped by either party, barring a wave year. This election, the lean and the toss-ups, the lean and the tilts are. So, moving into the next ones, I want everyone to remember, these states are, my lean column is not, lean columns in general should never go to a state that could not flip. These are well within confidence interval for the most part, because the confidence interval is about plus or minus 7%, and the highest you can be in the lean column is plus 10 in the two-party vote, which generally speaking is not actually plus 10, so generally speaking, lean is more or less always in my confidence intervals. So, in this case, I'll start listing some of the Democrat leans, and that'll make a bit more sense. So, like, we have New Mexico, Colorado here. New Mexico's generally speaking plus 5-6 for Biden in two-party vote. So that would mean, with my generally speaking 7% confidence interval on the state-by-state levels, it would not be unreasonable for Trump to win that state. It would be unexpected, per se, or perhaps, but it would not be a result that my model is wrong, per se. It is close enough that if that happened, I would not be shocked, albeit I would be confused. Something that would shock me is if on election day with this model Trump wins California. That would be shocking. Trump winning New Mexico? That's not shocking. That is just, oh, my model needs tuning. Trump wins California, that's, my model is garbage, I need a new model. I hope that helped explain some things here. To continue the rest of the Democrat leans, we got Virginia, we got New Hampshire, and we have Maine at large. Those are the Democrat leans. We got Republican leans. There's some interesting ones here. So we have Arizona, Nevada. Nevada has shifted again, a bit closer for Trump in the polling. If you look at other polling aggregators like 338, it's moved up from being like a 10-point margin for Biden to being a 6-point, and my model, generally speaking, predicts like 6 points higher Trump result than other models because of how I'm predicting turnout and undecideds to vote in like broad terms versus other people, which is probably where my main source of error will be if I'm wrong. I don't think I will be wrong, though. I think this is going to be a lot more likely, a lot closer than a lot of people realize. Keep in mind, too, that Nevada was predicted to be in Trump's column in 2016 with just the polling, and was pretty close. It was only like 2% for Clinton. So we got Iowa, Minnesota. Minnesota just eked into it yesterday. It was tilt Trump. The day before it was tilt Biden. The day before it was lean Biden. And the day before it was like likely Biden, if I recall correctly. I don't keep day-by-day state tracks, but I do have the day-by-day national numbers, so you'll see what I mean in a minute. Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Dakota, Georgia, Florida, and Maine's second. Oh, I called this. I'm supposed to be Maine's first. That was for Biden. Again, looks like Trump's going to win a... You'll see in a second. So we'll move into tilt Democrat. They got Nebraska second. Then we go tilt Trump. We got Wisconsin, Michigan. These are very close. They're outside of my toss-up category, but we're still talking Wisconsin and Michigan to be like in the realm of tens of thousands of votes. Pretty similar to 2016 in that regard, if Trump wins them. But again, it'd be perfectly reasonable for Biden to win it, and I wouldn't be shocked. I probably wouldn't even tune my model differently. It is that close that when you're talking about tilt margin with this model, you shouldn't even blink if a tilt is called wrong. I would not bet money on any of my tilts with this model as it is currently formatted. That disclaimer said, I've drawn, after this is like I think week 9 or week 10 of me doing polling aggregation and spitting out numbers in this model, I do have one call I'm going to make. Categorically, no matter what my models say. In previous elections, Ohio's been typically the main a big bellwether state. I believe it's voted with the president. Sorry, it is voted with the person who would win the president every election in the last like 50 years, something like that, in the U.S. This election, I don't think that's the one to watch. I think it's Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, of the Rust Belt states, is the one that is polling most favorably to Trump in the aggregate. If you look at 338, if you look at Real Clear Politics, and I believe 538 too, though I have some concerns with Nate Silver's model. We'll see. I could be wrong. He could be right. We'll see. But I think all these three models and mine all show Pennsylvania is the closest, the most favorable to Trump in the Rust Belt, and it is worth 20 electoral votes. And we'll see. I'll skip for a second. So instead of going to do Trump's best case, I'll go to Biden's best case first here. So what we see is a big swing back from last week's blowout in Biden's best case, though that said, you could still get a pretty big win here because, as I said, these tilts, which are worth 41 points for Trump, easily being Biden's column. He could easily win like 320. I think that's the quick mental math there. So what we see here is, I think, this is like the baseline scenario you should think of in your head. This 279 to 259. The reason I say it's the baseline is if Trump loses, I think this is the most likely scenario to look at for his loss. Obviously, this is Biden's best case, but I think, as by pretty my model, but I think this is almost certainly the result we're going to see if Trump loses when the election results are out. So basically, all you see here in Arizona, Florida, super tight. Nevada tight. Pennsylvania tight. I think this is the baseline scenario you should think of across all models. This is the most likely scenario if Trump loses. Now, with this, what I think this is going to mean is you're going to see here, Pennsylvania's tilt Biden. So, on election day, I guess there's mail-in ballots too, but on election, over the course of the election, if Pennsylvania is in Trump's column, expect the rest of the country to at least be this scenario. Obviously, you're going to see kind of opposites, like if, say, Ohio goes Biden's column on election day, or by mail-in ballot. If Ohio goes Biden, you can pretty much throw out my model, and my prediction is completely wrong. Now, that's me saying a lot, because it's only a lean, but I don't think I've had a scenario recently that has any. I'll phrase this differently. I think if Ohio goes Biden, I think Biden wins. I think Ohio represents a very, like, the voters in Ohio are very close to the median voter in the U.S. The reason, and that's why it's been a very good bellwether, because Ohio has a lot of is basically the median U.S. voter in the past. This election, I don't think it is, but it's still fairly close. Unless Trump wins in a blowout, in which case then I guess it's still pretty median voter. But I don't think Ohio is the median voter anymore. I think demographics have changed a bit. I think that's moved somewhere else. But that said, if Ohio flips Biden, I think Biden wins the election. Versus if Trump wins Pennsylvania, I think he's won the election. I think that's where we're going to see win or lost the election. So now, to move back to the Republican best case scenario, it's in the range of like 330 to 355, which is where it's always been bouncing around. Illinois is a bit safer. New Mexico is a bit safer. New Hampshire is a bit less safe. Really, not much going on here. Pretty consistent. It's bouncing around a little bit, but not a ton. Don't be surprised if it continues bouncing like this. As said before, since I think it's theoretically possible that any lean could go either column, it is perfectly reasonable in my mind. Not perfectly reasonable. It is not necessarily my model being wrong if on election day or at the end of the election Biden only got 131 electoral votes. I would be shocked if you only got 131 electoral votes, but I wouldn't be throwing out the model. That's a small tweak. If Trump won 538 electoral votes, I'm throwing out the model. That kind of thing. To give you differences of colors here. So that's more or less the different scenarios here. So let's bring up the graph, the glorious graph. This is what I mean when I say it's all over the place. So, what day was this? This was October 2nd. This was 2 updates ago. Trump's in a slight lead. He's like, what does that work out to be? I don't know. I guess I could look here. So Trump has a 1-point lead on October 2nd. Going good for him. The next day, he's down to a 0.9 lead. Still fine. The next day, he dumps down to negative 1.7. And then we're going. And then we get last update, where he's at negative 2.4. Then he bumps up a bit. Goes to 0.8, negative 0.8, negative 0.7, negative point, then negative 7.4. This is what I mean. It's all over the place. Like, you see, we have essentially a 2-day dump in the Trump-Biden numbers. So Biden, like, surges for 2 days, and then it goes back to where it was before. Like, what? You see the opposite happen, when was this? You see the opposite back in September 18th, where it suddenly Trump blows up, and then, like, 3 days later it goes back to roughly where it was before. It's like, what? So it's all over the place. Like, if this video was made 12th, like, Biden was going to, I believe, win in Trump's best case scenario kind of thing. Like, it was like utter. Oh, actually, it probably wouldn't be, because that's a huge margin of error on that day. It was a 7.5 margin of error. So actually, Trump would still win in the best case scenario. But, like, Biden was going to win huge landslide in his best case scenario. Like, I'm actually kind of curious what that would have worked out to be. He would have won by, like, nearly 20 points. Like, he would have won by so much in his best case scenario. That's the scenario where if we just scoop back to this other map here. Oh, that's the wrong one. If we scoop back to this one, that's the scenario where not only does Biden do this, but he also picks up Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, probably Montana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Missouri, Indiana. Like, all these states if he wins by that much. Possibly more. Probably all the likelies in this column. It would have been absurd. But, again, the polling, I guess you could say, went back to regress to the mean. Back to this small lead for Biden in my model. I expect Biden to continue with a small lead. I don't think Trump's is going to win the popular vote. If he does, the polls are really, 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 really wrong. I think they're just mostly wrong, and they're only mostly wrong. I don't think their subsets are wrong per se. I think they're just sampling wrong. If that makes sense. Like, I think people are lying to the polls, and that's why there's so many undecideds. And I think the undecideds are going to break overwhelmingly to Trump's favor, among many things. And that's not just my hunch. There's, like, some precedent to this in past elections. Like, the Democrat numbers have generally polled pretty well, and the undecideds never break to third parties. And they've rarely broken, in the last couple of elections, they haven't broken to the Democrats. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. Chaos, though. Models going everywhere. This is probably a sign that I need to do something about this. That's a lot of sensitivity. Probably too much sensitivity. And I think I know why there's so much sensitivity, but I don't want to change how I am running the numbers now, because it's going to change so much of the model results, and I don't think that's a good idea. I also don't really want to invalidate all of these weeks of updates that I have. Or sorry, all these days of updates. But yeah, please, if you liked the video, press like below. Share it to your friends. Scream it from the mountaintops. Comment about how I am dumb, how my model is stupid, how Trump can't win. Or conversely, comment below how Trump's going to win 538 seats in all of Mexico. I don't know. Until next time, when we have another update for this glorious series where I make my first election prediction model and predict an election. And who knows, maybe I'll do better than the pros. Ooh, suspense. Take your bets now in the comments below. The winner will get nothing, because I have no money. See you next week.